I will tell you something simple that took me many years to understand. The small habit that quietly protected my health was not a miracle diet, not a secret medicine, and not a complicated exercise program. It was a scale in the corner of my bedroom. I am 99 years old now, and for most of my adult life, I stepped on that scale regularly, not obsessively, not fearfully, simply with awareness. When people hear this, they often laugh. They say, "You mean just weighing yourself helped you stay healthy?" But that question misunderstands the point. The scale itself does not change your health. What it changes is your awareness, and awareness changes your decisions. You see, the body speaks in small signals long before it speaks in illness. A pound gained slowly over several weeks, a few pounds lost during a stressful season, a steady upward trend after holidays or after months of sitting too much. These tiny shifts are not dramatic. Most people ignore them. But those small signals are like whispers from the body saying something is changing. Regular weight monitoring simply allows you to hear those whispers. Over the years, I noticed patterns. When I moved less, my weight crept upward. When I ate carelessly for several weeks, the scale showed it before my clothes did. When I returned to walking every morning and cooking simple meals again, the number quietly settled back down. That small feedback loop shaped my behavior more than any rule ever could. The scale never judged me. It only informed me. And information, when received calmly, becomes a powerful guide, because when you see change early, you can respond early. You adjust your habits gently instead of waiting until the problem becomes large and difficult. That, more than anything else, is why such a simple habit can quietly enhance health over a lifetime. Let me explain what I learned over the years, because the number on the scale was never the real story. The real story was what that number revealed about the quiet rhythms of my life. When I was younger, I did not think much about health. Most people do not. In our 20s and 30s, the body feels strong and forgiving. You eat a little too much, you sleep too little, you skip exercise for a few weeks, and nothing dramatic seems to happen. The body compensates, it adjusts, it hides the consequences. But time slowly removes that illusion. By the time I was in my 40s, I began noticing something interesting. My weight no longer stayed the same without effort. If I stopped paying attention to my habits, the numbers slowly crept upward. Not quickly, not alarmingly, just quietly, month after month. At first it was only 2 or 3 pounds. That does not sound like much. Many people would ignore it. But those few pounds were not random. They were signals. When I reflected honestly, I could see the causes. A period of sitting more and moving less, several weeks of eating rich foods during family gatherings, a season of stress when I slept poorly and stopped walking in the mornings. None of those things felt dramatic at the time, yet the scale recorded them with quiet honesty. That was the first important lesson I learned. The body always reflects the life we are living, and the scale simply shows us that reflection. Without regular monitoring, these small changes accumulate unnoticed. 5 pounds become 10, 10 become 20. By the time people realize something is wrong, the problem feels overwhelming. But when you observe your weight regularly, the story unfolds differently. Instead of discovering a large change months later, you see small changes as they happen. A pound gained this week, 2 pounds lost the next. a steady trend upward over a month. Those small observations give you time to respond calmly. For example, there were many seasons in my life when the scale gently warned me that my habits were drifting. Perhaps I had stopped walking in the evenings. Perhaps my meals had become heavier than usual. Perhaps I was snacking late at night while reading. None of these habits were terrible on their own, but they added up. Because I monitored my weight regularly, I noticed the pattern early, and that awareness changed my behavior in subtle ways. I would return to morning walks. I would cook simpler meals for a few weeks. I would become mindful again of how often I reached for unnecessary snacks. Notice what did not happen. I did not panic. I did not starve myself. I did not begin extreme diets. I simply adjusted my habits. That is the real power of monitoring. It turns health from a crisis into a conversation. Your body sends signals. You listen. You respond gently. Over time, this creates a cycle of awareness and adjustment that protects your health without constant struggle. Another important thing I learned is that weight reflects more than food. It reflects the entire rhythm of life. Sleep affects weight, stress affects weight, activity levels affect weight, even emotional seasons influence it. There were years when I cared for family members who were ill. During those periods, my routine changed. I slept less, I moved less, I ate irregularly. The scale showed those changes clearly. But instead of feeling discouraged, I learned to interpret the information with compassion. The body was not failing me. It was simply responding to circumstances. When life returned to a calmer rhythm, my habits improved again, and my weight gradually stabilized. This perspective is important because many people treat the scale as an enemy. They step on it with anxiety or avoid it entirely because they fear what they might see. But the scale is not a judge. It is a messenger, and messengers only bring information. Over the decades, I also began reading more about health and metabolism. Scientists often speak about how body weight is connected to metabolic health. Gradual weight gain over time can increase the risk of conditions like diabetes, heart disease, and joint problems. On the other hand, maintaining a stable weight often reflects balanced energy intake and regular activity. But what fascinated me most was the psychology behind monitoring. Studies began showing that people who regularly track their weight tend to maintain healthier habits, not because they are obsessed with numbers, but because awareness encourages consistency. When you see the results of your lifestyle regularly, it becomes easier to stay aligned with your goals. Imagine driving a car without a speedometer. You might gradually drive faster without realizing it. But when the speedometer is visible, you adjust naturally. Weight monitoring works the same way. It is not about perfection, it is about feedback. Over the years, my routine became very simple. Once or twice a week, usually in the morning, I stepped on the scale. I did not overanalyze daily fluctuations because the body naturally changes from day to day. Water levels change, salt intake changes, hormones change. What matters is the trend over time. If the trend remained stable, I knew my habits were balanced. If the trend began moving upward or downward, I looked at my lifestyle and asked simple questions. Am I moving enough? Am I sleeping well? Am I eating more than my body needs? These questions often revealed the answer immediately, and once you understand the cause, the solution is usually gentle. A few more walks during the week, a return to simpler meals, more attention to rest. Small adjustments, repeated consistently, have enormous long-term effects. Looking back across nearly a century of life, I can say something with confidence. Health rarely depends on dramatic actions. It depends on small habits repeated thousands of times. Regular weight monitoring is one of those habits. It does not demand much effort. It does not require special knowledge, but it creates a steady stream of feedback that helps guide your decisions. In that way, the scale becomes something surprisingly valuable, not a measure of self-worth, but a quiet instrument of awareness. And awareness, when practiced over decades, becomes one of the most powerful tools for protecting health. By the time I reached my 60s, I began to understand something even more important about that small number on the scale. It was not just a reflection of daily habits. It was also an early warning system. Most health problems do not appear suddenly. They grow slowly, quietly, over many years. Long before a doctor diagnoses high blood pressure, diabetes, or heart disease, the body often shows subtle changes. Energy levels shift, sleep patterns change, and very often body weight begins to drift. I watched this happen to many people around me. Friends who had been healthy for decades slowly gained weight year after year without noticing it. At first it was only 5 pounds, then 10, eventually 20 or more. Because the change happened gradually, they adapted to it without realizing the long-term effect. Then one day a doctor would say something they never expected to hear. Your blood sugar is too high. Your cholesterol has increased. You need to reduce your weight for your heart. To them it felt sudden, but in reality the process had been unfolding quietly for years. This is where regular weight monitoring becomes powerful. It helps reveal those slow trends before they become serious problems. Let me give you an example from my own life. In my early 70s, I went through a period when my routine changed. I had retired from work, and at first I enjoyed the slower pace of life. I read more books. I spent more time sitting. My morning walks became shorter and less frequent. Nothing felt wrong. But after several weeks, I stepped on the scale and noticed that my weight had increased by 3 pounds. That may not sound significant, but it caught my attention because my weight had been stable for many years. Instead of ignoring it, I asked myself a simple question: what has changed? The answer was obvious. I was moving less. So I began walking again each morning, just as I had done for decades. I also returned to cooking lighter meals during the week instead of relying on convenience foods. Within a month, my weight returned to its usual range. That small correction may seem insignificant, but imagine if I had ignored those first few pounds. Perhaps they would have become 10 pounds over the next year. 10 could easily become 20 over several years. And with that extra weight would come additional strain on the body. The heart works harder. Blood sugar becomes more difficult to regulate. Joints carry more stress. Energy levels decline. Small changes accumulate, but small corrections also accumulate. This is the quiet advantage of paying attention early. I also learned that weight changes can sometimes signal other shifts in health. For example, unexpected weight loss in older adults can sometimes indicate nutritional problems or illness. In such cases, noticing the change early allows someone to speak with a doctor before the problem grows more serious. Again, the scale does not diagnose anything, but it raises a flag that says something is different. Over time, I began thinking of weight monitoring the same way farmers observe their fields. A farmer does not wait until crops fail to look at the soil. He walks through the fields regularly, observing small changes in the plants, the moisture in the soil, and the color of the leaves. Those observations allow him to respond early. Our bodies deserve the same attention. Another important lesson I learned was that weight stability often reflects balance in many areas of life. When my weight stayed steady, it usually meant several things were working well together. I was eating reasonably balanced meals. I was moving my body regularly. I was sleeping enough. Stress was manageable. Weight, in that sense, became a summary of many health behaviors combined. Of course, the number itself was never the goal. The goal was the lifestyle that supported it. I never chased extreme thinness, and I never believed health could be reduced to a single number. But a stable range often meant my habits were aligned with what my body needed. And stability matters more than perfection. As the years passed into my 80s and then my 90s, I became even more grateful for the quiet discipline of paying attention. Aging changes the body in many ways. Metabolism slows. Muscles gradually weaken. Recovery from illness takes longer. During these years, it becomes even more important to maintain balance. Regular weight monitoring helped me notice when I needed to adjust my habits. If I became less active during winter months, the scale reminded me to move a little more. If I lost weight during a stressful season, it reminded me to nourish myself better. These were never dramatic corrections, just gentle adjustments that kept my health moving in the right direction. And I believe those gentle adjustments protected me from many larger problems. Today, when people ask me how I reached 99 with relatively stable health, they often expect complicated answers. They ask about secret foods, rare supplements, or special exercise programs. But the truth is far simpler. Health is built through awareness. When we pay attention to the signals our bodies send, we can guide our habits before small problems grow into large ones. Weight monitoring is simply one of the clearest signals available to us. It shows trends over time. It reflects lifestyle patterns. It reminds us when our routines drift away from balance. Most importantly, it encourages us to stay engaged with our health. Because the greatest danger to well-being is not imperfection, it is inattention. When we ignore the body for years, problems develop quietly until they become difficult to reverse. But when we remain aware, even of something as simple as body weight, we stay connected to the process of caring for ourselves. And caring for oneself day after day, decade after decade, is one of the most powerful habits a person can cultivate. That small act of stepping on a scale may seem trivial, but over a lifetime, it can become a quiet guide that keeps your health moving gently, steadily, in the right direction. Now, at 99 years old, when I look back across the long road of my life, I see that health was never the result of one great decision. It was the result of thousands of small ones. Most of them were quiet, ordinary, almost invisible, choosing to walk instead of sit, cooking simple meals instead of relying on heavy foods, going to bed at a reasonable hour, and yes, stepping on a scale once in a while to see what my body was telling me. None of these habits felt extraordinary at the time, but together they formed a pattern of awareness. That awareness is what protected my health. When I monitored my weight, I was not chasing perfection. I was simply paying attention. And that attention allowed me to notice small changes before they became large ones. A few pounds gained could remind me to move more. A few pounds lost could remind me to nourish myself better. Over the years, those gentle adjustments kept my body in balance. That is why I tell younger people something very simple. Do not wait for illness to begin caring about your health. The body is always speaking long before disease appears. Weight changes, energy levels, sleep quality, and appetite are all part of that conversation. When we observe those signals calmly, we gain the opportunity to guide our lives in healthier directions. Regular weight monitoring is not a magic solution. It will not cure disease or guarantee a long life, but it is a powerful form of awareness. And awareness leads to better choices. Better choices lead to healthier habits. Healthier habits, repeated over decades, shape the quality of our lives. In the end, the scale in my bedroom was never just a measuring device. It was a quiet reminder to listen to my body. And listening year after year may be one of the simplest ways to care for your health throughout a lifetime.